Welcome, fellow seekers of leadership enlightenment, to the Service Leadership Library, where we dive deep into the realms of wisdom, humility, and genuine connection. I'm your host, Nicholas Paluco, curator of all things servant leadership. And today we're graced with the presence of a true beacon of inspiration. Joining us in the journey today is Dana Hanchin, the maestro behind HDC Mid-Atlantic, where she wields the power of service with finesse and grace. Prepare to be enlightened and entertained, and perhaps a little mischievously inspired as we embark on another enlightening journey through the corridors of servant leadership excellence. With 25 years of experience addressing the complex needs of lower income communities and building the leading affordable housing initiatives, Dana Hanchin serves as president and CEO of Mid-Atlantic. Dana considers the mission of providing affordable housing her long life work, driving by a sense of justice and love. She earned a BA in political science from Kent State University and an MA in urban studies from Temple University. She is also a graduate of Drexel University Leading from Change Fellowship Program. In 2021, she received the Emerging Leader Award from the National Neighborhood Works Association. When not working, Dana enjoys riding her bike, mixing amazing cocktails, taking long walks with her wife, and 2 rescue pups. So I'm thrilled to have Dana with us here today to talk about HDC Mid-Atlantic, a nonprofit organization that develops, builds, and manages affordable housing for low-income families and seniors in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland, and her journey in leadership, as well as her journey in leadership through service. So, well, Dana, I'm sure our listeners are eager to learn more about you and your work. So let's dive in right now. But before we get started, I need to understand, what is the best drink you like to mix, since I saw that you're a mixologist.
Oh, that's a good question. So it's well, thank you so much, Nick. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And what an incredible introduction. I kind of felt like a dancer more than a leader.
I love it.
You such flowery words, and I just felt like, maybe it's just because it's a Friday. But I appreciate that introduction.
Absolutely. You deserve it.
I have many cocktail favorites. I will say that in my household, I am the visionary for making cocktails. And then I have my spouse who then executes on that vision. So not dissimilar to my role as a CEO, where you're creating vision and then you have people to execute on that vision and strategy around.
I love that.
So,
that's perfect.
Yeah, some of my favorites are, I really love a bourbon sour, which is a play on a whiskey sour. So if you remember, like, going to all these weddings, like all the Polish weddings you went to where the old man would go up and order whiskey sours, they're way better than that. So it's like taking a classic and just making it, like, just elevating it and using egg white. I'm a big fan of egg white in cocktails because it ends up making it frothy, and then you feel like you're having a Slurpee.
Oh, I love it. Our organization is having a bourbon and backups meeting coming up, like seminar, down at the press room. So sign up. We'll get all your best recipes.
Oh yeah, I don't have far to go. It's right around the corner.
Right. We're gonna learn about all the different bourbons, and we're gonna have 15 minutes of a little bit understanding of some protection of your business, but we enjoy having anybody with us.
And you'll have coordinate transportation home, right?
That's right. Ubers for everyone.
Ubers for everyone.
Well, thank you for that. That is really awesome. Can you kind of, Dana, give us a little understanding of yourself, kind of your career path, right? Like, we heard this really, you've really have gone through a wonderful path in your career. Can you kind of give the listeners an understanding of kind of where your career path started and what that leadership journey has looked like for you, that lands you where you're at right now today? Sure.
I would say it's a story that becomes certainly easy to tell in hindsight, but, starting out, in the field of affordable housing and community development, I never envisioned myself having a seat in the corner office. What was most important to me was to continue to hone my craft and learn and grow and make an impact in communities. And so certainly I will share a little bit about my family and sort of that story and how it connects to sort of where I am today. And, I was born and Western Pennsylvania in the Monongahela Valley. And of course, you heard that I went to Philadelphia to get my master's in urban studies. So I was in Philly for almost 25 years, but I was raised in my early stages up into like from a kid up until about junior high, I was in Western PA. So I share this because my family comes from working class roots. Both my grandparents, my grandfathers were steel workers, and that identity is like sort of rests very deeply within me. And we had talked earlier about work ethic and commitment. And pierogies. So as you know, I think
gotta love those pierogies.
Pittsburgh does reign supreme on the pierogi. And there's some sort of family myth that exists out there for me that somebody once said that we may be related to Mrs. T's, you know, the gigantic pierogi maker. But I don't know if that's true or not. But in any case, so that background and working class history of my family really sort of informed my own sort of experience, and also my father's journey, because and you think about the way that we as a society have been organized in terms of the economies and how families are created around jobs and communities are built, and sort of how that transforms when you have a shift in your economy, right? So you think about historically, we were an industrial sort of based society, then we moved to a service-based society. And that's an important aspect for me to share, because my father, when he graduated from high school, he went out to go look for a job, and he went to all the steel mills. His mom would pack him a lunch every day. He would go out and try to get a job, and no one would hire him because there was a war brewing. And so no one would hire him because they thought he was going to be drafted. And so he just ended up enrolling in the Marines. And this is like an important caveat to understand me as a leader. So I say this because my dad met my mom while he was a bit in the Marines at the end of his tour, and they ended up getting married and having 3 little girls, and my dad raised basically 3 little Marines. So if you're talking about servant leadership, and then also being raised as a Marine, where you're supposed to get things done, hustle, don't let anybody down, and it's never fast enough or good enough, you know, that's sort of like the undercurrent of how I operate. But what I really became aware of is, as my dad, you know, came back from from service, he, got married, had a family right away, worked 3 jobs. You know, I remember as a little girl, you know, my dad used to clean banks at night, and we used to go in our pajamas, and he'd prop us up on the counters while they were vacuuming all around. So really trying to, you know, build a life for themselves. Through that experience, there was a program that was offered at that time in the mid 70s through HUD, that they were able to assist people of lower incomes purchase homes. And so my parents actually qualified to participate in this program, and HUD paid 50% of their mortgage. And they paid the other half, and they were able to become homeowners through that program. Now that program doesn't exist, and it never will come back. So that was sort of in the days of where there was significant prioritization for affordable housing at both a home ownership and rental level. But I will say this, and this is what connects to sort of, there's so much more of the story in this in terms of my father's journey, because he became successful through just being a hard worker. But in when I was in college, all that experience and 20 years of experience of him in the workplace without a college degree, at another point in time where then the pressure of the economy said, you have to have a college education in order to grow. And so my dad ended up losing his job at a time where he had 20 years of experience, but then no one would hire him because he didn't have a college degree. So he was only able to get, I will say, not entry-level jobs, but jobs that were that he had far more experience than, he was overqualified. And so that journey, and witnessing that, and watching my parents build a life and just work really hard, and then constantly, sort of just grappling with this notion of like how to continue to thrive, and then feeling like they got stuck because things, the pressure in terms of the expectations and requirements changed. And so, honestly, it was really devastating to my family and to my dad as an identity and as a father and a provider. And so witnessing that and seeing, that experience really affected me. And I also would share that, recognizing that, my family as a white family had privilege in that, because the programs that were offered to my parents weren't necessarily open to everyone. There was a practice that, it's evidence-based and historically rooted in discriminatory and sort of policies that limited people's ability to access programs. So I don't know if the program that my mom and dad participated in, if they did not offer it to everybody, but for the most case, if there was a historical sort of track record of other people of color not being able to access those same opportunities, right? So even when my parents struggling to sort of hold on and onto a middle class livelihood, recognizing that, if you were a person of color, or if you didn't speak English, or, if you were a single parent household, things became far more complicated. And so, when I went to get my my bachelor's at Kent State University, honestly, I wasn't even thinking about college when I was in high school. I mean, honestly, I don't even know how I graduated. My mom would tell you that my junior year, she thought I wasn't going to make it. I was like, really? I don't even know. I mean, when you were a teenager, I was kind of an art punk, so, and,
you don't know till you kind of get further through that journey, right?
No. And, I picked the college in my backyard. At the time we were living in Ohio. I did high school in Ohio. My older sister went to Ohio State. And I didn't like her, so I didn't want to go to Ohio State, even though it was 60,000 people. So I just went I went north of Columbus, and I went to Kent State. But I will tell you, I started out as a fashion design major. So as somebody who really was seen as creative and artistic in high school, I was just thinking about, well, how do I monetize that? Well, I guess I can make clothes and people will buy them. But at the end of the day, it didn't really work for me. And I ended up, exiting, with a bachelor's degree in political science. But I will tell you that where I really found it to be exciting was my minor in geography, where I really took a look at economic geography and began to explore the impact of economies and the boom and bust cycles of economy in places and in communities, and not only in terms of a global perspective, but a local perspective. And that's when I started to center in on understanding the urban environment, as a vehicle for families and business and communities to thrive. And so I ended up going to Temple for my master's degree. And funny story is
into
that
an urban environment right there.
Yeah, definitely. And so I will share that my mom thought I was going to flunk out of high school, and I wasn't really interested in learning in high school at all. And then in college, I really became, excited about learning. And that's why I went, to get my master's degree, because I felt like I just got started, and ended up graduating with honors at my bachelor's degree, and then getting my master's paid for because of my academic
congratulations. That's amazing.
So I just say that because I was kind of I was kind of a punk who didn't really care about much in high school, and and just trying to figure things out as I go. And so
kind of like a lot of kids, even thinking today, right? Like there's still this mantra of like, everybody should go to college and you won't get a great job. And they're so confused because some of them, I have 4 children. So I have 2 that are twins that are seniors going through this. And they're like, well, what if I don't pick it perfectly? I'm like, this isn't a perfect thing. This is like, get into it, find out what your passion is. Because it's so amazing. Your story, I'm about to tear up, because like your story is identical almost to mine, and not in the education part, but in the same journey. So right down the block from where you're at was the banks that my dad took us to clean and to work. That's crazy. It just is. So, but we didn't know any better. Like our family was very close knit. and we didn't have a lot, but my father was like, if we work hard, we'll get what we need. And my grandparents must have gone through the similar time frame, but they were kind of, since they were immigrants, they were put in boxes when they came here because they were different. They
Yeah.
spoke German and Polish and Ukrainian, and so they really had a hard time connecting into the area and were kind of put in boxes, and they had a really hard time getting housing, and they
Mhm.
always thought that somebody was trying to take it away from them. I just remember as a kid, like, and they didn't understand. They didn't know how to assimilate the same way. So my
Well,
father then went into the Navy before he got drafted and met my mother. It's the
yeah.
same story. Met
Oh
my
my
mother
goodness.
in high school. So the Lancaster Catholic, they met. My mother came from upstate PA because they were out of work, got here, and they met at Lancaster Catholic because you didn't have to pay back then. And so where my dad's mantra was work hard, have a faith, believe in something, and always give back to those that have less than you do. So there is, and so that kind of is the same story, right? And I was the same thing. Like high school wasn't my thing, but then I got into my college career. Thank goodness those moms. My mom was like, "Go check this out," and
Yeah.
it spurred a love, and you just found that passion. So
Yeah.
sorry, I got us off track there a little bit,
No,
but
no, not at all.
that's amazing.
I think you just said something that was really powerful in terms of placing people in a box. Your
Mm,
grandparents were placed in a box, and they were trying to figure out how to make connections and thrive,
right.
but they kept being limited by it. And I would
Yeah.
just want to recognize that moment, Nick, is that those boxes are still happening today.
Yeah.
Right? And it's very important that we do everything we can to sort of figure out how do we remove barriers and increase
Yep.
opportunities and get people out of those boxes, or
Yep.
don't put people in the boxes that think they have to conform in a certain way. And that
Right.
I would say that assimilation is not the goal. It is really about inclusion and having
Right.
a sense of belonging, and that there's room for everyone.
That's right.
And so diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of geography, of race, ethnicity, of religion, all of that. And it
Right.
makes our lives richer because of it. So I just
You're
want to,
you're absolutely
yeah.
right. And I think it's key, right? Like I get very passionate about it. That's what I love so much about the organization you love for many years, just the passion of serving others and doing it in such a humbly way, but involving everyone and getting an understanding of how we can contribute as a community. But Lancaster is very special too. But it is fascinating. And it's fascinating how we do there's so much judgment in so many areas that even at executive levels or other areas, that is very frustrating to me. I was not brought up with that understanding, right? So it's like we're all who we are. We accept each other for who we are, agree or disagree. But it's really sad to see, like, even interviewing some of other constituents of mine. When I was growing up in the business, I was too young. I didn't know anything. You're just not smart. And that's like not effective for other leaders to do that, right? Like we need to be like
Never.
you don't drive a fancy car, so you don't have any value to me. This is nonsense, right?
Yeah.
And so
Well,
how do we break those barriers down everywhere for even people that, like, how do we even help each other like that with what Lancaster County does? Even a lot of my time on my volunteer work, we're speaking about all the same things, and we can't seem to just figure out how to get together all the time. And there's
yeah.
so much passion of like, how can we even dynamically between same religions, or like even congregations have a hard time getting together, which just is frustrating, I guess, but empowering to see that we're making change, you know?
Yeah, no, and I think that's an interesting point too about being of service to your community, which is very much an important value and to give back. But it's also important, I believe, to understand what you're giving and if it's actually leading to
To a
positive or
result.
bigger to a
Yeah.
result. So I have an opinion that I know people will like, and people are of service because it feels good to them to be of service.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, you have to think about the impact of your effort on a system or on a organization
Right.
or an issue and saying, well, how am I really changing this? So charity is lovely, but charity, it focuses in on the day to day. The
That's right.
long game is that we need to see substantive change happening in our communities. I mean, not just in Lancaster County in
Right.
terms of what that looks like. And honestly, Nick, that is really, really hard work.
Yes.
It's emotional work. You talk about sort of diversity of opinion and ideas and ideologies, and
Right.
what is the action you can take together, and what resources do you need to bring that happen? Because you can
Right.
bring people and you can talk about it all day, but it's not going to matter. Like, we could
Right.
probably get 20 people to go dole out soup at a soup kitchen for people who are who are homeless.
Right.
But ask them about building a shelter in their neighborhood
Right.
to resolve the
It's
issue or
more
to
of the
build more
action.
permanent housing. Yes.
Yep.
It's like then it becomes a little bit more challenging to figure out how do you create some sort of consensus or strategy that we can execute on.
Right. Like in our world, even in business, we call them all symptoms, right? All these
Yep.
people are trying to solve the symptom, but what's the root? And the root's hard. And you have to lean into the root, and it's uncomfortable, and you got to be willing to take that just a little bit further. And I think that's what's really cool about the opportunity of leaders. You said one really unique thing that we hear all the time is that I'm the one with the vision, and the others around me bring that vision alive, right? And we run a operating system called EOS, right? And so the visionary is generally the CEO, right? That has this big picture idea, but then there's an integrator that knows how to get it down through the organization, that vision alive. So I think that's really important, even in what you're talking about, right? Like many times we have a lot of people working on symptoms and they really want to help, but there's not that collective vision to be able to execute on or solve for the root.
It's funny because and I'm sure we could go over to decades and find a game of whack-a-mole, because I bet we would totally rock at it. But sometimes I talk about the work that HDC does on a day-to-day basis, like a game of whack-a-mole, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's such a need for affordable housing. We build the housing, and guess what? The need is still there. And you just keep banging away at it over and over and over again, because an inequality exists. There's a lack of supply. There are decades upon decades of discrimination and systems that don't actually create an environment where we can do more around of creating affordable housing. And so I always talk about the game of whack-a-mole is dealing with the programs and resources you have right now to address it, but you have to look at the systems change. You have to look at policy. You have to look at advocacy. You have to look at all the things that need to shift in order to make the current day environment a little easier, and the need to and
I think there's a little bit of humbleness there too, right? Like as leaders, as growing up myself, as many times it was kind of like you were taught to solve your own problem, right? Go solve your own problem, and that's not really the solution, right? Being humble enough to say, hey, I'm this organization. We need to solve this problem together. What are other organizations that we can partner with? We hear a lot in our community about partnerships, which is quite amazing. But talk to us a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So talk to us a little bit. So I love the passion, because I will totally derail us today about all of this because I have the same passions. But so from your perspective, right, of how difficult it is, how did you, from your father teaching you, right? But let's talk about where did you learn to lead? Like how did you develop those skills? Who was there people that you mirrored or looked upon to learn this? Was it instinctive? Like how did you become such a passionate and effective leader?
Well, that's a good question. And, I will also share this part of my story, Nick. Through all my work experiences, I worked with a lot of great organizations and with a lot of great people. I cannot recall one person ever saying, hey, Dana, I think you could be a really good leader. That is absent in my sort of journey. And I don't know why, but I would say that when I decided I wanted to sort of take my career to the next level and, become an executive
Mm-hmm.
CEO, that it was a decision I made for myself.
Okay.
And I honestly came at a moment in time where there was a lot of things happening in the world about the way that honestly how women were being viewed and treated in the workplace, and also some things happening where I thought, you know what, I cannot play second fiddle. I cannot be in second chair anymore. And I was fine with that. And I was propping up other leaders, basically. I mean, my hand was just up everybody's back, telling them what to do and what to say, and having the vision and the execution and being fine. Because the responsibility of leading an organization is overwhelming. And for in my mind, it's really came down to one thing. Not necessarily about, can I do the job, but the people that depend on you to do the job. Just think about it. I mean, how many people or employees do you have in your workforce? They are working for you. And guess what? They have mortgages, they have school, they have education, they have college tuition, they have all these things that they have planned for their families based on their employment with you. And if you screw it up, Nick, you may have to work through retention, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so the responsibility of saying, if I don't do well, I have 150 employees that I'm responsible for, and their lives that they built, because of the the employment they have here. So that was my biggest hesitation to sort of step into that role.
Well, and you got two, right? You're in a unique position, right? I mean, you have your employees that you lead that serve the people that you serve, and all of the other people that you're in essence trying to serve in a different manner has to be quite difficult, right? Like the demands of your workforce compared to the demands of a board or the state or the government or whatever, like that's got to be extremely difficult. Like, how do you navigate that?
I don't know. I mean, Nick, I think my brain is splintered in 1,000 pieces every day. But so it's interesting because I think about it a lot in terms of that. I think it was instinctual for me. So I was a kid in the neighborhood that was always organizing things, not necessarily like the best things, but the things that got you in really good trouble, right? Fun trouble, I don't know. And so I was always trying to I had ideas and I bring people together and I'm like, let's make go-karts, let's create a cleaning company, let's put pantyhose over our head and scare our neighbors, So I've always, I think I've always had this sort of leaning towards just getting things done. And if I saw something that needed to get done, I didn't wait for someone to tell me, oh, do this. I just said, let's do this. And so that's been part of my personality, which I think is about sort of how I was raised, because my parents are get it done kind of people. They don't wait. And honestly, if you're like my dad, there's images growing up where I have memories where my dad was like, we're leaving, we're going to the mall. And it wasn't like in 5 minutes or a half hour. He walked out the door and he would pull out of the driveway and we would be running with shoes in our hand. That's how fast you had to move. It was instantaneous. So it's just always been sort of, and my dad owned a restaurant at one point. And so I was 9 years old. That was my first job. I got I actually didn't even get paid. There was a video arcade next door. That's why I mentioned Whack-A-Mole and why I love Decades so much. Big plug for Decades. Because he would pay us in the video tokens, right? And,
that was smart.
Yeah. So, so just always, my mind was always moving and thinking. You always had to anticipate what was next and then take care of it.
Yeah, that's an excellent word, right? Like leading is kind of anticipating. Kind of many of us say listen, as a leader, we have the people behind us, like you had mentioned earlier. However, it's kind of like a visual of we're in a desert. We have everyone together and you're as a leader are going to walk forward to see, is there danger? Is it safe? And hey guys, let's all come along. And that's a lonely place to be sometimes, right? And as you mentioned, a lot of stress, right? Everybody thinks that when you meet the leadership top, this is a wonderful place to be. Although it is, because you can make such great impact, but it comes with a lot of responsibility and
Mhm.
a lot of sacrifice. It's not, and so it's amazing to hear that too. I was laughing too because my father, I didn't realize how much I was also an unpaid employee for my father when we worked many jobs. I just thought it was kind of time to be with dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
like, this is super cool. I'm with dad. He gets me an ice cream when we're done. But
that's
then,
right.
like what you had said, I didn't realize like solving bigger problems was really fun. And so I
Mhm.
didn't realize as I started to do that, we didn't have any money to start these ventures. So my father would say, go earn it. And I didn't have any employees. So I started this landscaping company like at 11, right? And I was obsessed, right? And I had delivered 4 newspaper routes and it taught me how to collect money and deal with customers. And he had said, hey, listen, if you need an employee, you can pay me to do it, but I want to teach you. And that was the coolest thing that I learned as a leader. And I don't know if he did it intentionally, but it seemed like it, right? Like he taught you, like, if this is what you're going to do, this is what you're going to have to execute on. And
Mhm.
he wasn't getting rich, believe me, but just the action of teaching me those things in those manner really helped me to understand that when you lead forward, it's about educating and empowerment
Mhm.
and not and we hear so many like what we call bad leaders sometimes that are about dictating, right?
Mhm.
And so I didn't realize, it sounds like the same from your life, that we got this wonderful education that we really didn't even completely understand at that time. But I
No,
know I'm
it's
very
true.
thankful for my father
Well,
for
I
doing
would just
that.
say my dad did lead very authoritatively. Let's just be clear. But I think there is something, and as a Gen X leader, and I really do think the generations matter in terms of what leadership looks like now, which is more, it's a collaborative approach to
Right,
leadership. It is
right,
not top down. It is
right.
not, don't worry, I'll make all the decisions and I'll just tell you what to do. I mean,
Yep,
honestly, I don't want those employees at my organization. If you're just waiting to be told what to do, that's not the
right,
environment we want to create. And so I want people to have intellectual curiosity. I want to cultivate a growth mindset. I want people to believe that regardless of title, everyone can be a leader. They can initiate,
yep.
they can influence, and sort of take control of, sort of, if they see things that need to be improved, then suggest them. Like, how do
Go
we
it and
create
do
that
it.
space
Right.
where their voices can be heard? And we don't always like accept everything that's recommended or
That's
changes or
right.
things like that,
Right.
but at the end of
But
the
they're
day,
heard.
they're heard, and we're figuring out, and we always talk about why we're doing things or why we're not doing things. So I think leadership looks very different than, like my predecessors. There's only 3 other predecessors to HTC, and we've been around for
Mm,
53 years. So just coming in with this sense of wanting to be collaborative, wanting
right.
everyone to sort of understand their role as a leader, owning their body of work and not just their
Yep.
task list is such an important
That's
piece
key.
of how you make the machine run or how you make it thrive.
That's right.
Because we're pushing boulders up hills all the time,
All
right? All the
sometimes I
time.
feel like they're rolling over me, but outside of
that's
that.
that's that what is it, the parable of Sisyphus. Try to pronounce that. It's so it's about that pushing that boulder up the hill, and you get it all, you're all the way
Yes.
to the top, and it rolls back over you.
Right back
um
on.
but
Yeah.
that's the work every day. And I think what's interesting about the role as a leader, you talk about sort of sometimes it can be a lonely place, and oftentimes as a leader, I think in terms of, you want to be transparent, you want to share the why, but you
Right.
also, you share the facts, but then also you just need to make sure that you have trust within your organization,
That's right. That's key.
um, and being able to bring people in that are aligned with the values
That's
and the
perfect.
direction where you're headed. Because even if you're technically competent in your role, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't.
It doesn't. You have to have both of those things.
That
Um,
that is wonder. That's key, right? So Patrick Lencioni talks about the 5 dysfunctions, right? Right
there's
there at
my
the
book.
bottom.
There's my book, Nick.
It is. It's so amazing, right? And so true. And I will tell you, as a leader, growing a company for 22 years, that's one thing that took a very long time to figure out.
Well,
That inherently you want to trust, but leading through that and building it. And then you said trust, core values, amazing, right? Like you're hiring, training, coaching, maybe even firing based on those core values really means a lot. Like we realize, listen, we want to be with people that meet our mission. We as a for-profit still feel that we're there to serve those that we support, right? And how do we do that if we don't have like-minded people that want to serve in a similar way? And so that's amazing. You're like hitting all the bullets, right? And
Well, and I would say, Nick, anytime your leadership team changes, you have to restart that whole process again because the
absolutely.
dynamic changes. And,
Oh yeah.
I've been at HTC almost, it'll be 6 years in June. And,
Wow.
I'm
Feels
still
like
working.
yesterday.
Right. and it is a work in progress. And because one thing that you realize as a leader, that the only thing that happens consistently is change. Right. And
Yeah.
so you get really good at managing change, even though other people
Yes.
around there like get panicked and like, oh my God, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And go, do not worry. We have built a strong organization that this one shift is not
Right.
going to collapse anything. We're going to
That's right.
adapt and we're going to move forward. I mean, COVID taught us that to a great degree.
You're absolutely right.
But
well, and I think that's key too. What you're saying is that also most people aren't afraid to change if they're empowered with education. And I think that's what you're saying, right? Like if they trust you and you empower them with education and then you move through together as one united front, people start to get used to that comfort. What I think has been terrible to see in certain circumstances is how when you bring an employee in that's not been in a good environment and they're like, well, what do you mean I don't want to be open? Like you'll fire me, or and to me, like it just fires my passion for like why we're human beings. Like why can we not treat each other with respect? And that gets me fired up.
Yeah, no,
And
kindness
yeah.
is important. And kindness doesn't necessarily mean that I know it's a soft word, but it doesn't mean that you're sitting there, giving hugs all day. I mean,
That's right.
it just means about how are you delivering your message and can it land where people can hear it and feel okay about what it means to them and be able to ask questions. Even if it's about their performance or it's about a new initiative. I mean, I always find that as much as you do plan for the change that's happening and the time it's going to take, every time I map that schedule out, I'm like, now I have to double it because it never goes as fast as I want.
I think that's a well said. One thing that I also found out kind of hearing you too, which is very, very neat, right? Like from the aspect of kind of leading, we talk about trust and then we get commitment, and that kind of is going through Patrick Lencioni's kind of book, but then also kind of empowering those team members. And what I found in many of my years where I messed up as a leader is when I got upset, like, why am I upset about the situation, right? Like I would go and think about it. And I realized that we didn't properly state like what is truly those values. And every time I sat back and said, man, one of my core values is we before me. Why am I so upset? And now and it took quite a few years to be like, you know what? It's not that the person is bad. We just are not aligned potentially in those values. How do we get in that alignment? And that was really a game changer to then be able to properly communicate, to know that we're either on the same page or we're not.
We're not. And that's such an important component, I think, is you coach people up into where they need to be, or you realize you may have to coach them out. And that's what's being kind. If you can coach them out.
Yeah.
And so I think and that weighs heavily on us as leaders because we're human. Like you said, we are human. And I think sometimes I say I need to remind myself of that as well, because that you're just going on all pistons. Like what, I don't even know if I'm using that right. I don't know cars, but and you're doing, like, you may have a packed schedule and your schedule looks like you're addressing 10 different, very unique, mutually exclusive things. And so you talk about your brain being split and all that you have to manage. And sometimes I have to pull myself back and say, okay, and people will remind me and I'll be like, okay, and it'll ground myself in like, okay, I need to step back. Yeah. This is a human element of it. And I just sometimes need a little ping to get me back in that zone because as someone who's just, again, raised in a way of where, You show up and every time
Action.
you come in the office and you knock it out of the park. You know, like one of our values is excellence, and striving for excellence is exhausting. No joke. Let alone that, you know, I would say, you know, I think let alone just trying to manage the work and how you're striving for that every day. And one of the things that we did in 2023, Nick, is that we had our core values and very clear messaging around it. But we, you know, it was still not necessarily ambiguous, but like what does it mean to everybody in this organization? How do you distill it down into behaviors? And so, you know, we did that for every value that we have, and we have about three or four behaviors that basically identify that. So like we have a value called community, and one of the first things we state is the behavior that shows up there that says, I am welcome here. And that
means what you're doing is you're creating that clarity regardless of who it is, regardless of what position they're in. And I think that so many organizations miss that part because we come in to execute, we come in to drive. And when there's that harmony on the same page of, do we all understand what these values mean? It also, I think you probably notice, maybe not, that now people talk about it in that manner. So like when we defined it so detailed, it's like, well, I don't think the actions of what you're doing right now are really a 5-star experience. So like we know what that is. So like, how can we get on the same page? It created a language for an individual to be able to talk to their fellow employee without this feeling of like tattling or negativity. And it's like, hey, did you go beyond the status quo? Like, did you take that extra step to call the client back? Did you follow up? Did you, you know, send a nice message? Like, and you're able to then, it's amazing when you can see it populate through the organization.
I mean, that's peer accountability where you feel comfortable and saying we all agree to uphold these behaviors, and each one of us can be like, hey, you know what? One of our behaviors is that I am kind and supportive in giving feedback. And so sometimes feedback comes at the wrong time. You could say the same thing on a different day, no problem. On another day, totally, you know, it just sets you off. But you know, being able to say, I understand you want to give me this feedback. I'm not being able to receive it very well. And, you know, so like, there's just ways that I think we can use these behaviors that we define as just points of engagement when things get a little, you know, a little crunchy. And that's one of the things I think too, that I think is really hard in the workplace and as a leader is to make sure you're creating space where conflict or discomfort or dissension or confusion, they exist and it's okay, but we have to call it out and work through it. And if we're just going to be in denial about it, or we're adverse to moving through it, you know, we're not going to make progress. That's one of, you know, Patrick, I can't pronounce his last name.
Lencioni.
That's one of the things he talks about, right? How well you can engage and move through conflict. And that is something that I'm striving for, you know, every day here at HDC is to make sure that we have that space of being like, we can have differences of opinion. That is actually a creative process, you know, to be different and iterative and come up with better outcomes. These are all sort of tied in together. So, but it's
amazing. I mean, when we talk about leadership, right? Like some of the people that are moving up into leadership or trying to find their career, like, you know, they think it's mystical, right? But like, it's messy. Like it's learning. And I think what I'm hearing from you is like, you got to lean in. You gotta hit the uncomfortable, but push forward. Come today for excellence. Like try to strive to be better, you know, one moment at a time, right? Like I'm an all or nothing guy, so I have to constantly watch myself of saying, okay, like it's okay. I can just do one thing each day and build up to it. That is a struggle. But I think Seth Godin has a book that says like, just start by doing, right? And it's about like just taking one step. I think the thing that I laugh about so much, but it's like a reprogramming of your brain. It's like, well, I want to go to the gym and I want to exercise because it's January. And he goes, well, that's the end. You want to be at the gym exercising, but what is the one thing you got to do first? He goes, you got to get dressed. So one day, just walk in, put your clothes on, sit in the sofa and say, I got dressed. Next day, put your clothes on, drive to the parking lot. I got to the gym, drive home. I'm there. Just start by doing a little, not all or nothing. So that's pretty neat. That's amazing to hear it with such passion that you bring. I think that's amazing.
Well, I would say it's funny, Nick, because I'm an all or nothing person too, and I don't know what that means.
We're like twins, you know.
Well, I don't know. I feel like and as a leader, I have to remember that too, because I'm all in.
That's a good point.
And I am boom, you know.
Yeah.
And if I'm out, there's just like there's not, you don't get many chances to come. I don't, you know, like honestly, I feel like when I'm done, like I've already reached it and I'm out, you know. So it's but it is, that's one thing I know, like I feel you know, one of the things, you know, when you are a leader, but also in your journey, your professional career, you get feedback on how well you're doing and what you need to be doing to improve. And I will say to you that what I need to improve has been the same thing I need to improve at 25 as at 54. You know, it is my perpetual journey to address like this
You're
one
just
thing.
fine tuning it all the time.
Yeah, it's like I get better at it, but and when they say like we would like you to do this differently, I'm like, I know everybody does, and I'm working on it. But and it's that journey, and it's interesting too, because you know, and as leaders, I think this notion of you know, we talk about reading books and things like that, and leaders being calm in the face of a storm and calm when there's ups and downs, and how do you create a steadiness so that people have confidence, you know, in the organization. And it's interesting because people like us that are passionate, right? And I say we're passionate because we believe deeply in what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And that's why people get attracted. That's why people want to do business with you and want to join HDC and figure out how to advance, you know, our affordable housing mission. That's like, Dana, your passion is so amazing, you know. And then there's this opposite effect of what happens when your passion isn't amazing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because you're just like, you have to sort of balance that out and know, like in some days, like I may not be the coming in on my best day, and I don't have the passion, and everyone's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" I'm like, "Can I just have?"
Because they lead from the top down, right?
Yeah.
Like what is the matter?
I know, like nothing's the matter. I'm just tired, and you know, I just for now, I just want to be like just kind of flat. And they're like, "That's not who you." I'm like, "I know, but it is who I am. You just don't see all those facets because you do have to bring it and how much." As leaders, I will say I feed off people's energy who give back, because you give so much, and when you get a little bit back of that same energy, it just keeps you going, and it's so powerful. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I think that's well said too. But see, I think that's an indication of your leadership, right? You're being open and honest to just say, like today, my wife and I have a thing when we're at home now, and it says when we wake up, we both don't have 100% every day, right? And so some of us might have 50%, some of us might have 80%. So we wake up and say, listen, where are you at today? And I'm like, oh man, I'm at 50. She goes, well, I got the 80 today. I'm going to carry the 80 and we'll just do this, or vice versa. And we just call it out. It's weird.
That's Brene Brown.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that, because I don't do that with my wife. I do it with my COO, my second in command, at the end of the day.
Smart.
or when we meet, I say, "What do you have in your tank?" And she tells me, and I tell her what I have in my tank. So at least I know the gauge of where she's at, because that helps me understand like how we enter into conversations. So you're right. Like she could come in and be like, it could be 10 a.m. in the morning. She's like, I've already had a day where I've got 10% left. And I'm like, great. I'm at 90. We're going to go. Or at least I know like how I manage that moment with her. How I show up for her. That I'm going to help her get to, you know, a higher percentage, or just be with her at that low percentage and be like, that's okay. You know, we're going to get through it and figure it out.
I love it. I mean, I think ultimately what we're saying is, as leaders, is it's about being what Lencioni says, humble, hungry, and smart. And smart is an intelligence. Smart is just drive and ability to understand people, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I find like also being open, like what you mentioned. Hey, something happened at our organization the other day. I got all the staff together and said, this is my fault. Like, just own it. right?
Yeah.
And if you trust the people appreciate you being a human being. Like, I screwed this up. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to lead through it. And that's scary, right? Because I got the leadership team together before, and I'm like, are you guys freaked out about this? Like, it was nothing earth shattering, right?
Yeah,
But you
yeah,
care so much about your people,
yeah.
and you want to make sure that they can live great lives and take care of their family. And so you overthink it sometimes too, right? But I'm like, listen, you just got to own it, right? If I'm
Well,
the
yeah,
leader, I might have not created the problem, but you
you own it.
just got
You
to
own
lead
it.
through it.
Yep. And I
Yeah.
will say that the two things that I do more than anything is say thank you and I'm sorry.
Yes.
Like that is what it takes as a leader to recognize people's success and you uplift them and their work and just
Right.
express gratitude. And then also when you screw up is to apologize and take corrective action
Right.
immediately. Don't just say you're sorry and then say we're going to work on something, we'll get back. And then a year later, maybe you've done something or maybe it fades away. But employees
Right.
remember that. You
They
have to
do.
show up and you have to follow through. That's show up and follow up are the two things I say. How to be successful? That's it.
That's
That's
and
like
we're all in
so
the
much of
seat.
the
We're all in the
game.
seat because we're good at our seat, right?
Yeah.
Charlene is a wonderful person in your organization. There's absolutely no way I could do her job, right? But like she owns her seat, she knows it. It's really great, right? So I think it's important too to celebrate everybody's seat, right? Like
Yeah.
you're born, you get it, you want it, you have the capacity to do it, and so I think that's great. There's one thing that we have this thing called the 24-hour rule. So if you have had conflict or frustration with someone, we teach, listen, you praise in public and you give correction in private. But if you were offended, and even if it was an accident by someone, you have 24 hours to address it with them. Because if you don't, when you show back up, it's
Yeah.
going to show up.
Yeah.
And so, how do we get in front of it? And so, we try to teach that over and over again, just to be like, listen, I don't care how small it is. We had a scenario that somebody was like, listen, I felt left out. Whoa, like that wasn't the intention.
Right.
So, 24-hour rule, we get it out and we move on. And so, I think that I hear you saying similar things, right? Just confront it, be open
Yeah.
and honest. And
Well, I mean, it's that sort of sense of like being okay with conflict, right?
yeah,
And if you're not, I mean, I know have employees that are not okay with
yeah,
dealing with conflict, and they
yeah,
just want to kick it down the road or say, "Why don't you handle it?" I'm like, I don't
no,
think you want me to play referee or serve as your
right.
parent between two children that are
Yep,
having problems communicating, especially at certain C-suite levels.
that's
You would
right.
expect that to happen, or
Yep,
to then say, what other supports can you have, like mediation through HR if you don't feel comfortable,
right,
if depending upon the sort of type or issue of
right.
conflict that may be being
Yeah, we say,
managed.
I'm not going to take your monkey, right?
Yeah,
Don't tell me your problem because you want me to own it.
yeah,
Like, I'll help you own it.
right.
What advice do you need to own it? I think that's kind of a fair statement, right?
Uh,
Kind of as we wrap up too, one thing that Patrick Lencioni has this really cool exercise that you're saying that you're talking about is it's called the team effective exercise. And it has a document, but the premise of it is that you get your team together after you feel that you have trust, and you go around the room, and the leader goes first, and everybody writes the name down of every person in the room, and they answer two questions. What's one thing that gives you, like, that you do really well for the group, or what is the thing that amplifies you in the group, and what's one thing that you could do differently, or what's one thing that you could improve on. And so Patrick makes it way more eloquent in his writing than I do, so I apologize there. But what was amazing is then they say, okay, the rules of engagement are, you have to listen. The leader goes first and listens to every person say the good things. Then you go around and everybody says the one thing that they want you to work on. And you cannot debate, discuss, or have a conversation about it other than one clarifying question. And so we've done this many times, but it's like, oh man, like I know, like you had said earlier, oh, I know that. All right, I'll work on that. But what was fascinating is it helped other team members in a safe place be able to learn how to give feedback to their other fellow members.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't realize the impact of that. When you facilitate it, they were actually open. And it's not derogatory things. It's just kind of, and it brought a team together really tightly. So I thought, as you were talking about that, I thought I'd share that with the listeners too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one.
Oh,
I was just going to add, we do something similar, and maybe, I don't know where it came from in a book, but we call it stop, start, and continue. What are the things you want to stop? What are the things you need to start? And what do you want to continue doing?
Oh, I like that. I like that. Yeah. Well, so as we kind of wrap up today, I know I've taken you off track here. I understand when we got started, listeners, she has a meeting, and I'm probably past that time. But
I just texted him to say I'm running late, so we'll see.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. Well, as we wrap up, what would you tell other leaders that are listening? Ones that are trying to become leaders, those that are in leadership positions. Could you kind of give us some words of wisdom from your perspective as we wrap it up today, as your leadership style?
Well, I always strive to be aspirational and inspirational, and in my leadership, because I remember myself as an employee in other organizations, and whenever the leader would step out and speak, I wanted to be inspired. And I wanted to see the pathway forward. And so I try to remember that in my leadership style. And I don't believe in perfection, but it's something that I strive for. And I also think this notion of humility and accessibility are very important. So that if you show up on site, someone may not even know that you're the president and CEO, right? Because you're not coming in with ego or prestige or position. You're just showing up and wanting to make connections with your employees. So I am, in my role, I'm always focused on the relationship and making sure that I'm a person by which, regardless of where you are in the organization, you feel comfortable in being able to connect with me.
I love it. That is well said. I appreciate you sharing. Now I'm going to take a few notes on that one when we're done, because I'm going to utilize. I'm going to borrow that if you don't mind. All right, everyone. Dana has another appointment, but so let's wrap this up today as the curtains draw on another riveting chapter in our servant leadership library. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to our exceptional guest, Dana from HDC Mid-Atlantic, for gracing us with her wisdom and her wit. Remember, folks, leadership isn't about wielding authority. It's about serving with compassion and courage. So until next time, keep leading with your hearts and serving with style. This is Nicholas Paluco signing off, reminding you to stay humble, stay committed to the noble path of servant leadership. Goodbye for now, and may your leadership journey be as epic as a bestseller in our leadership library.